Okay, so we're going to practice some basic calculations. If you just stay calm, keep breathing, your order of operations will save you every time. So we're going to start with some data to work with here. So we've got 4 sets of scores. This must be correlational data because I have X's and Y's. So the first person that was measured got a 4 on variable X and a 6 on Y. The next person got a 2 and a 4, 6 and a 3, 3 and a 1. So only 4 people in the sample, and that's our data. So let's just start with the most fundamental thing we could start with. I could ask you to compute this. Now the first thing you want to do is read that like English. We do not want to say sigma x. I mean, I can't stop you, but trust me, I've been teaching this class a long time. It does not benefit you in the long run. Sigma x means nothing. If someone walked up to you and said, hey, can you sigma x? You'd go, I don't know what you're talking about, ma'am. But can you sum up the raw scores? Oh, that tells me to do something. That makes sense. So in particular, sum up the raw scores for variable x. So again, the sigma is an instruction that says, hey, add up whatever's attached to me. And what's attached is the letter x. So what I want you to make sure you're doing with this video is pause it as you need to. Make sure you're using your calculator. Calculate along. Make sure that you are getting the answers that I'm reporting. Make sure you can do this with us so that you can do it on your own. So it says I go to variable x and add them all up. So I go to variable x, 4 plus 2 plus 6 plus 3. So the summation of variable x is 15 points. Likewise, I could have said, all right, well, let's do the summation of the raw scores for variable y. Well, you do the exact same thing. You look at variable y and you add up whatever scores you've got for it. 6 plus 4 plus 3 plus 1. So the summation of raw scores for variable y is 14 points. All right, so now let's branch out from there. So that's like the most fundamental sort of a calculation we can make. Let's say instead of that, what I've asked for you to calculate is this. Now again, your instinct is going to want to be to say something to the effect of sigma x squared. Again, that doesn't really mean anything. So let's stop first and think about our order of operations to figure out how to say this. Parentheses don't have any. Exponent we do. So this is raw score, so the squared raw scores, and then the summation. So we are going to get the summation of the squared raw scores for variable x. Well, what that means, let me move this over a little bit. Is the first thing I have to do is square all the raw scores for variable x. So get a little scratch work column over here. 4 squared is 16, 2 squared is 4, 6 squared, 36, 3 squared, 9. Our order of operations, exponents first, so we did it, we squared the x's. Now what do? We are going to get the summation of those squared raw scores. So 16 plus 4 plus 36 plus 9. And you should get the value of 65. Now, let me change it just a little bit here. Let's say instead of that, what I asked you to do was this. Adding those parentheses changes everything. Our first order of operations is parentheses. So we have to do whatever it says in the parentheses first, which is get the summation of all the raw scores for variable x. Well, we did that already. We know that that's 15 points. That was the first thing we did. 4 plus 2 plus 6 plus 3. Sum up your raw scores first. And then what? Then we are going to square the summation. Here we squared the scores first, then summed. Here, because of the parentheses, we have to sum first, then square. So we know that what that actually is then is 15 squared. Plugging our 15 in there. So 15 squared, or the value for that is 225. The difference between the parentheses and not is a common thing in our statistical formula, so you have to really pay close attention to that. You can see what a huge difference it makes in the results. 65 points versus 225 points. That's a big difference for just the placement of a pair of parentheses. Let us do a couple more. So what are we going to do here? Well, order of operations. First things up is parentheses. What's in the parentheses? What's in the parentheses is raw score for x minus 1. So what it wants us to do is to subtract 1 from all those raw scores. And then we are going to, so we're going to adjust those raw scores by subtracting 1 from them. And then we're going to sum up those adjusted raw scores. So the first thing we have to do, get a little scratch work column here, is chip 1 point off of all of our x values, all our raw scores for variable x. So 4 minus 1 is 3, 2 minus 1 is 1, 6 minus 1 is 5, 3 minus 1 is 2. So we've done all the adjustments, we've subtracted 1 from all the raw scores, and now we sum up those changed raw scores. So 3 plus 1 plus 5 plus 2, and we get 11. Now let's compare that against, if I move the parentheses, if I shift the parentheses to back here, again, order of operations will save us. We have parentheses, do whatever it says to do in the parentheses first. Inside the parentheses, it says to get the summation for all the raw scores for variable x. 4 plus 2 plus 6 plus 3 is 15. Minus 1 is 14. Honestly, the formulas that you're going to be dealing with this semester, if you can just keep from hyperventilating about them looking kind of crazy and scary, they really are just this. If you can just break it down into the little pieces, the little bite-sized chunks, the math is not that hard in this course. It's no harder than what we're doing right here. There's just more of it to do is really all there is to it. Let's do a tricky one. Or tricky for many students anyway. So now what do we got to do here? Remember, sigma is an instruction and it tells you to sum up whatever's next to it. And I mentioned before, unless you hit a different instruction later on, and I'll show you what that is next. So what's next to our sigma? What's next to our summation sign? Well, x times y, raw score x times raw score y. We know in algebra, when we put the letters together, it means to multiply them together. So what this wants us to do then is to sum up the products of x times y. So what we need to do is get those products. We have to figure out what our x's times our y's are, right? So our 4 times our 6 is 24. 2 times 4 is 8. 6 times 3 is 18. And 3 times 1 is 3. And then it says, okay, well, you've got the products. Now sum them up. So 24, I don't know where 18 came from. 24 plus 8, oh, I guess down there. 18 plus 3, add all that stuff together, and what do you get? 53 is what I've got. That is something that you will be doing in chapter 14. Again, we won't really have y's until we get to chapter 14, but that's basically how that is built there. Now, I said the sigma is an instruction until you tells you to some things until you get to another instruction. So let's say I had written this. The summation of the products, variable x times variable y, times 5. Well, here is our new instruction, that plus. It's a different command to do. So it'd say, well, take care of this part first, which we know is 53, and then add 5 to it. 58. So again, it's a matter of just stay breathing, break it into little parts, and just take it one step, one order of operation at a time. You should absolutely be practicing this, because you know I'm going to ask you this on quizzes and exams. It's the building blocks for the whole course. Let me show you one quick example. You don't need, I'm going to write a formula on here. You don't need it at this moment. You will in chapter 4. But in chapter 4, where I consider the course really to be getting into actual statistical calculations for realsies, you're going to have a formula that looks like this. Well, we haven't seen that symbol for the N yet. We will in chapter 2. It's coming. But notice that this is 2 of the things we literally just did. That's a chapter 4 formula. It can, you know, if you don't stop and breathe and calm down for a second, it can feel overwhelming. But if you just look at it and go, oh, I know how to do that. The summation of the squared raw scores. So let me square my raw scores and then sum them all together. Oh, over here it says sum all my scores first and then square it. And then I'm going to take that and divide it by some other thing, apparently. So all the formulas, for as, you know, out of context as intimidating as that might look to some of you, it's all just the same building blocks. So make sure you practice, practice, practice. The one thing you don't want to do is be experimenting with your calculator or experimenting with your flow to make your calculations when the timer's running on quizzes and things. So you want to be able to just smoothly just get the work done. All right, so that concludes chapter 1. We've got all the lecture in for our very first chapter. From here, I recommend that you go through the book, you make more notes, review the video as needed, do the lab, and you'll see that on Canvas, and I talked about the intro video, and then move on to your quiz by the end of the week. So there it is. We'll see you for chapter 1 lab, and then a little further on down the road, we'll see you for chapter 2. All right, everybody, have a good one.